Volume 3, Part 15 of Herodotus Histories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Scott DeBrucker. Histories, Volume 3, by Herodotus of Halicarnassus, translated by E.D. Godley, Part 15. Such was the plight of the Persians, for all the time until the coming of Xerxes himself ended it. Mardonius, however, seeing that Xerxes was greatly distressed because of the sea fight, and suspecting that he planned flight from Athens, thought that he would be punished for persuading the king to march against Hellas, and that it was better for him to risk the chance of either subduing Hellas or dying honorably while engaged in a noble cause. Yet his hope rather inclined to the subduing of Hellas. Taking all this into account, he made this proposal. Sire, be not grieved nor greatly distressed because of what has befallen us. It's not on things of wood that the issue hangs for us, but on men and horses. Furthermore, there's no one among these men who thinks that he has now won a crowning victory, and will disembark from his ship in an attempt to withstand you. No, nor anyone from this mainland. Those who have withstood us have paid the penalty. If then you so desire, let us straightway attack the Peloponnese, or if it pleases you to wait, that also we can do. Do not be downcast, for the Greeks have no way of escaping guilt for their former and their later deeds, and from becoming your slaves. It's best then that you should do as I've said. But if you've resolved to lead your army away, even then I have another plan. Do not, O king, make the Persians the laughing stock of the Greeks, for if you've suffered harm, it's by no fault of the Persians, nor can you say that we have anywhere done less than brave men should. And if Phoenicians and Egyptians and Cyprians and Cilicians have so done, it's not the Persians who have any part in this disaster. Therefore, since the Persians are in no way to blame, be guided by me. If you are resolved not to remain, march homewards with the greater part of your army. It is for me, however, to enslave and deliver Hellas to you with 300,000 of your host, whom I will choose. When Xerxes heard that, he was as glad and joyful as a man in his situation might be, and said to Mardonius that he would answer him after deliberating which of the two plans he would follow. When he consulted with those Persians whom he summoned, he resolved to send Artemisia as well, because he saw that she alone at the former sitting had discerned what was best to do. When Artemisia came, Xerxes bade all others withdraw, both Persian counselors and guards, and said to her, "It is Mardonius's advice that I should follow here and attack the Peloponnese, for the Persians, he says, and the land army are not to blame for our disaster. Of that they would willingly give proof. Therefore he advises me to do this, or else he offers to choose 300,000 men of the army and deliver Hellas to me enslaved, while I myself by his counsel march homeward with the rest of the host. Now I ask of you, seeing that you correctly advised me against the late sea fight, counsel me as to which of these two things would be best for me to do." When she was asked for advice, she replied, "It's difficult, O king, to answer your plea for advice by saying that which is best. But in the present turn of affairs, I think it's best that you march back, and that Mardonius, if he so wishes and promises to do as he says, be left here with those whom he desires. For if he subdues all that he offers to subdue and prospers in his design, the achievement, sire, is yours, since it will be your servants who have accomplished it. If, on the other hand, the issue is contrary to Mardonius's expectation, it's no great misfortune so long as you and all that household of yours are safe. For while you and the members of your household are safe, many a time will the Greeks have to fight for their lives. As for Mardonius, if any disaster befalls him, it doesn't much matter, nor will any victory of the Greeks be a real victory when they have but slain your servant. As for you, you will be marching home after the burning of Athens, which thing was the whole purpose of your expedition." Artemisia's counsel pleased Xerxes, for it happened that she spoke what he himself had in mind. In truth, I think that he wouldn't have remained even if all men and women had counseled him so to do, so panic-stricken was he. Having then thanked Artemisia, he sent her away to take his sons to Ephesus, for he had some bastard sons with him. With these sons he sent Hermodamus as guardian. This man was by birth of Padassa, and the most honored by Xerxes of all his eunuchs. The people of Padassa dwell above Halicarnassus. The following thing happens among these people. When anything untoward is about to befall those who dwell about their city, the priestess of Athena then grows a great beard. This had already happened to them twice. Hermodamus, who came from Padassa, had achieved a fuller vengeance for wrong done to him than had any man whom we know. When he had been taken captive by enemies and put up for sale, he was bought by one Panonius of Chios, a man who had set himself to earn a livelihood out of most wicked practices. He would procure beautiful boys and castrate and take them to Sardis and Ephesus, where he sold them for a great price. For the barbarians value eunuchs more than perfect men by reason of the full trust that they have in them. Now among the many whom Panonius had castrated was Hermodamus, who was not entirely unfortunate. He was brought from Sardis together with other gifts to the king, and as time went on, he stood higher in Xerxes' favor than any other eunuch. Now while the king was at Sardis and preparing to lead his Persian army against Athens, Hermodamus came for some business down to the part of Mysia which is inhabited by Chians and called Atarneus. There he found Panonius. Perceiving who he was, he held long and friendly converse with him, telling him that it was to him that he owed all this prosperity, and promising that he would make him prosperous in return if he were to bring his household and dwell there. Panonius accepted his offer gladly, and brought his children and his wife. When Hermodamus had gotten the man and all his household into his power, he said to him, "Tell me, you who have made a livelihood out of the wickedest trade on earth, what harm had I or any of my forefathers done to you or yours, that you made me to be no man, but a thing of naught? You no doubt thought that the gods would have no knowledge of your former practices, but their just law has brought you for your wicked deeds into my hands. Now you will be well content with the fullness of that justice, which I will execute upon you." With these words of reproach, he brought Panonius' sons before him, and compelled him to castrate all 4 of them, his own children. This Panonius was compelled to do. When he had done this, the sons were compelled to castrate their father in turn. This, then, was the way in which Panonius was overtaken by vengeance at the hands of Hermodamus. Having given his sons to Artemisia's charge to be carried to Ephesus, Xerxes called Mardonius to him, and bade him choose whom he would from the army, and make his words good so far as endeavor availed. That is as far as matters went on that day. In the night, however, the admirals, by the king's command, put out to sea from Phalerum, and made for the Hellespont again with all speed to guard the bridge for the king's passage. When the barbarians came near to the girdle, in their course, they thought that certain little headlands, which here jut out from the mainland, were ships, and they fled for a long way. When they learned at last that they were no ships but headlands, they drew together and went on their way. When it was day, the Greeks saw the land army abiding where it had been, and supposed the ships also to be at Phalerum. Thinking also that there would be a sea fight, they prepared to defend themselves. When, however, they learned that the ships were gone, they straightway resolved on pursuit. So they pursued Xerxes' fleet as far as Andros, but failed to catch sight of it. When they came to Andros, they held a council there. Themistocles declared his opinion that they should hold their course through the islands, and having pursued the ships, should sail forthwith to the Hellespont to break the bridges. Eurybiades, on the other hand, offered a contrary opinion, saying that to break the bridges would be the greatest harm that they could do to Hellas. For, said he, if the Persian is cut off and compelled to remain in Europe, he will attempt not to be inactive. This he will do because if he remains inactive, he can neither make his cause prosper, nor find any way of return home, but his army will perish of hunger. If, on the other hand, he is enterprising and active, it may well be that every town and nation in Europe will join itself to him by conquest, or, before that, by a compact. He will then live on whatever yearly fruits of the earth Hellas produces. But as I think that the Persians will not remain in Europe after his defeat in the sea fight, let us permit him to flee to his own country. Thereafter, let it be that country and not ours which is at stake in the war." With that opinion, the rest of the Peloponnesian admirals also agreed. When Themistocles perceived that he couldn't persuade the greater part of them to sail to the Hellespont, he turned to the Athenians, for they were the angriest at the Persians' escape, and they were minded to sail to the Hellespont even by themselves, if the rest wouldn't, and addressed them as follows. "This I have seen with my eyes, and heard yet more often, namely, that beaten men, when they be driven to bay, will rally and retrieve their former mishap. Therefore I say to you, as it is to a fortunate chance, that we owe ourselves and Hellas, and have driven away so mighty a band of enemies, let us not pursue them who flee, For it is not we who have won this victory, but the gods and the heroes, who deemed Asia and Europe too great a realm for one man to rule, and that a wicked man and an impious one who dealt alike with temples and bones, burning and overthrowing the images of the gods, yes, and one who scourged the sea and threw fetters into it. But as it is well with us for the moment, let us abide now in Hellas, and take thought for ourselves and our households. Let us build our houses again, and be diligent in sowing. When we have driven the foreigner completely away, then when the next spring comes, let us set sail for the Hellespont and Ionia. This he said with intent to have something to his credit with the Persians, so that he might have a place of refuge if ever, as might chance, he should suffer anything at the hands of the Athenians. And just that did, in fact, happen. Thus spoke Themistocles with intent to deceive, and the Athenians obeyed him, since he had always been esteemed wise, and now had shown himself to be both wise and prudent. They were ready to obey whatever he said. Having won them over, Themistocles straightway sent men in a boat, whom he could trust not to reveal under any question the message which he charged them to deliver to the king. One of these was his servant Sisinus. When these men came to Attica, the rest remained with the boat, and Sisinus went up to Xerxes. "Themistocles, son of Neocles," he said, "who is the Athenian general, and of all the allies the worthiest and wisest, has sent me to tell you this. Themistocles, the Athenian, has out of his desire to do you a service stayed the Greeks when they wanted to pursue your ships and break the bridges of the Hellespont. Now he bids you go your way, none hindering you." With that message, the men returned in their boat. But the Greeks, now that they were no longer minded to pursue the barbarians' ships farther, or to sail to the Hellespont and break the way of passage, besieged Andros so that they might take it. For the men of that place, the first islanders of whom Themistocles demanded money, wouldn't give it. When, however, Themistocles gave them to understand that the Athenians had come with two great gods to aid them, persuasion and necessity, and that the Andrians must therefore certainly give money, they said in response, "It is then but reasonable that Athens is great and prosperous, being blessed with serviceable gods. As for us Andrians, we are but blessed with a plentiful lack of land, and we have two unserviceable gods who never quit our island, but want to dwell there forever, namely, poverty and helplessness. Since we are in the hands of these gods, we will give no money. The power of Athens can never be stronger than our inability." It was for giving this answer, and refusing to give what was asked of them, that they were besieged. There was no end to Themistocles' avarice. Using the same agents whom he had used with the king, he sent threatening messages to the other islands, demanding money and saying that if they would not give what he asked, he would bring the Greek armada upon them and besiege and take their islands. Thereby he collected great sums from the Carystians and the Parians, for these were informed that Andros was besieged for taking the Persian side, and that Themistocles was of all the generals the most esteemed. This frightened them so much that they sent money. I suppose that there were other islanders too who gave, and not these alone, but I cannot say with certainty. Nevertheless, the Carystians got no respite from misfortune by doing this. The Parians, however, propitiated Themistocles with money, and so escaped the force. So Themistocles went away from Andros and took money from the islanders, unknown to the other generals. Those who were with Xerxes waited for a few days after the sea fight, and then marched away to Boeotia by the road by which they had come. Mardonius wanted to give the king safe conduct, and thought the time of year unreasonable for war. It was better, he thought, to winter in Thessaly, and then attack the Peloponnese in the spring. When they had arrived in Thessaly, Mardonius first chose all the Persians called immortals, save only Hydarnes, their general, who said that he would not quit the king's person, and next the Persian cuirassiers, and the 1,000 horse, and the Medes, and Sakai, and Bactrians, and Indians, alike their infantrymen, and the rest of the horsemen. These nations he chose in their entirety. Of the rest of his allies he picked out a few from each people, the best men and those whom he knew to have done some good service. The Persians whom he chose, men who wore torques and bracelets, were more in number than those of any other nation, and next to them the Medes. These indeed were as many as the Persians, but not such stout fighters. Thereby the whole number together with the horsemen grew to 300,000 men. Now while Mardonius was choosing his army and Xerxes was in Thessaly, there came an oracle from Delphi to the Lacedaemonians, that they should demand justice of Xerxes for the slaying of Leonidas, and take whatever he should offer them. The Spartans then sent a herald with all speed. He found the army yet undivided in Thessaly, came into Xerxes' presence, and spoke as follows. "The Lacedaemonians and the Heraclidae of Sparta demand of you, king of the Medes, that you pay the penalty for the death of their king. whom you killed while he defended Hellas." At that Xerxes laughed, and after a long while he pointed to Mardonius, who chanced to be standing by him, and said,
"Then here is Mardonius, who shall pay those you speak of such penalty as befits them."
So the herald took that response and departed, but Xerxes left Mardonius in Thessaly. He himself journeyed with all speed to the Hellespont, and came in 45 days to the passage for crossing, bringing back with him as good as none, if one may say so, of his host. Wherever and to whatever people they came, they seized and devoured its produce. If they found none, they would eat the grass of the field, and strip the bark, and pluck the leaves of the trees, garden and wild alike, leaving nothing. Such was the degree of their starvation. Moreover, pestilence and dysentery broke out among them on their way, from which they died. Some who were sick Xerxes left behind, charging the cities to which he came in his march to care for them and nourish them, some in Thessaly, and some in Cyrus of Paeonia, and in Macedonia. In Cyrus he had left the sacred chariot of Zeus when he was marching to Hellas, but on his return he didn't get it back again. The Paeonians had given it to the Thracians, and when Xerxes demanded it back, they said that the horses had been carried off from pasture by the Thracians of the hills, who dwelt about the headwaters of the Strymon. It was then that a monstrous deed was done by the Thracian king of the Basalti and the Crestonian country. He had refused to be of his own free will Xerxes' slave, and fled to the mountains called Rhodope. He forbade his sons to go with the army to Hellas, but they took no account of that. They had always wanted to see the war, and they followed the Persians' march. For this reason, when all the 6 of them returned back scatheless, their father tore out their eyes. This was their reward. Now the Persians, journeying through Thrace to the passage, made haste to cross to Abydos in their ships. For they had found the bridges no longer made fast, but broken by a storm. There their march halted, and more food was given them than on their way. Then, by reason of their immoderate gorging, and the change of the water which they drank, many of the army that had survived died. The rest came with Xerxes to Sardis. There is, however, another tale, which is this. When Xerxes came in his march from Athens to Ione, on the Strymon, he traveled no farther than that by land, but committed his army to Hydarnes, to be led to the Hellespont. He himself embarked and set sail for Asia in a Phoenician ship. In the course of this voyage he was caught by a strong wind called the Strymonian, which lifted up the waves. This storm bearing the harder upon him by reason of the heavy load of the ship, for the Persians of his company, who were on the deck, were so many, the king grew afraid and cried to the ship's pilot, asking him if there were any way of deliverance. To this the man said, "Sire, there is none, if we do not rid ourselves of these many who are on board." Hearing that, it is said Xerxes said to the Persians,
"Now is for you to prove your concern for your king, for it seems that my deliverance rests with you."
At this they bowed and leapt into the sea. The ship, now much lighter, came by these means safe to Asia. No sooner had Xerxes disembarked on land than he made the pilot a gift of a golden crown for saving the king's life, but cut off his head for being the death of many Persians. This is the other tale of Xerxes' return, but I for my part believe neither the story of the Persians' fate nor any other part of it. For if indeed the pilot had spoken to Xerxes in this way, I think that there is not 1 in 10,000 who would not say that the king would have bidden the men on deck, who were Persians and of the best blood of Persia, descend into the ship's hold, and would have taken from the Phoenician rowers a number equal to the number of the Persians, and cast them into the sea. No, the truth is that Xerxes did as I have already said, and returned to Asia with his army by road. There is further proof of this, for it's known that when Xerxes came to Abdera in his return, he made a compact of friendship with its people, and gave them a golden sword and a gilt tiara. As the people of Abdera say, but for my part I wholly disbelieve them, it was here that Xerxes in his flight back from Athens first loosed his girdle, as being here in safety. Now Abdera lies nearer to the Hellespont than the Strymon and the Ione, where they say that he took ship. End of Volume 3, Part 15. Recording by Scott Michael DeBrucker.